So Meredith sort of introduced herself to me, and she came with like her own crazy life, with the idea of like what would happen um, her if her boss asked her to sign a restraining order against her second in charge. And so right away, I had this like really crazy question of what could have happened to a firm that prides itself on integrity and, no drama, create that kind of drama. And so she already came with her job as a portfolio manager, which I think is one of the most exciting places when it comes to sort of active investing, because her job is she has a whole lot of investors that have invested in her fund, and she has to assure that she is not only creating the best investment vehicle of many, many different, corporate stocks and bonds and anything else that she feels meets the investment program of her fund. But she also is beholden to her company and to the shareholders of that company. And so she sits in a really tricky spot of if she doesn't perform, she's out. But she also doesn't have this like unwavering, I can just day trade anything I want. She has a very specific investment profile that she has to follow. So it's an exciting job that, many people have. And I wanted to kind of play with that idea of when she finds success, how is it that that threatens everyone around her? What I saw so much of, and what I continue to see with, so many folks in these like really high powered jobs is that they have marriages that just struggle with how do you deal with the amount of time you're away? How do you deal with the amount of stress one or both of you are under? And in her marriage, she has, a really supportive spouse who has basically lost faith in her that they, you know, can communicate, that they can really understand each other. So we start right off the bat with, there's been some sort of disruption in their marriage and they are really not speaking. They're not communicating. But when their daughter is obviously going through something and she's hysterical, they have to find a way to sort of continue to parent. But at the same time, she's being, really celebrated at her job. So it was kind of a fun moment to start the novel when there was just so many people needing a piece of her, and she needed to be a different person for each one, right? She needed to be sort of a sympathetic mother. She needed to be a communicative wife. She needed to be a strong boss. She needed to be a grateful, employee. And all of those things sort of, collapse down on her, in the same moment. And that was it's just a fun way to start. So much about what we do in financial services is about data. So much of it is who owns the data, who's sharing that data, who is it that's buying, who is it that's selling. So this idea of, so much of that is completely electronic. There's no one's giving anyone thumb drives. But what if someone got sort of the a thumb drive with data that no one else should have? There's no fingerprint on it. There's no idea of we know where it came from. We know where it's going. It's just this static piece of personal identifiable information. And when she recognizes it, she doesn't even have a way on her corporate laptop to be able to read this thing because those have all been shut down. Like you can't plug those things in. So she has to go about extra steps to try to read this thing. And at that point, she needs to try to understand who is it that it's threatening? Is it her? Is it her company? And, what does she do about it? And who is it that she is beholden to protect as well? I'm a huge plotter, so I love plotting because I feel like things get very complicated in my head, so I just have to sort of write them down. But what I don't do is I don't figure out actually who kind of the bad guy, if it's a guy, bad guy is. So what I do is I basically infuse everyone's with sort of a little bit of the good, a little bit of the bad, right? And sort of play with it as we go. And in my first draft, I sort of discover myself who it is that has perpetrated the calamity on Meredith's life. And in this case, it was fun because how I sort of sourced it kind of two ways. One of them is the SEC site, Securities and Exchange Commission, puts out these press releases on everyone that they charge and find guilty. And so it's really fun because they're really plain spoken. So they like say some pretty amazing things in there as to what people have done and how they've been punished and things like that. And so I'm like a almost a daily reader of them because I just feel like there's just so many story ideas for what could go wrong. Also, we've gotten into this, space of having to be trained on everything. So even if you don't know how you would money launder within or you wouldn't know how you would excessively trade in an account, we're almost going to teach you and then we're going to tell you not to do it. And that's what the training is. So there's just all this kind of corporate training to kind of prevent fraud. So I sort of assigned every character one of the SEC sort of backgrounds as well as one of the training modules that I did, and I sort of played with it, and I was like, "Is this true? Is it not about them?" So it's like I kind of assigned a gossip to them, and then over the course of the first draft, kind of pulled and pushed on that, and then obviously by the final draft, we were very clear on who did it, but it was always sort of hidden in plain sight. I knew really early on, I wrote three novels, in practice for this one. I really kind of worked through a lot of my ghosts in those. I did not want this to be this sort of Me Too book. I think there's elements of a lot of when people are privileged, when greed can become sort of a motivator. I think there's just bad behaviors that happen. And so, throughout the book, I think I've sprinkled them. I was just in New York this week and so many people who know about the book coming, they're like, "Am I in it? Is he in it? Like, did you?" And I'm like, "There's not one person in there, but you're going to start to recognize traits because I'm like this collector of like dialogue and traits and always kind of jotting them down in my notes in my app because I'm like, oh, I'm never going to remember this. But there's just very specific different mannerisms that I think are just really, really fun that I was able to play with in the novel for sure.